Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Real Movie Guy. No, it's just not just my show, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real point of view. I'm going to share. Yep, but I am the real movie guy, and I am joined by the movie maven herself, Miss Karen D. And we're on a real point of view. What we do here is talk about film and how it helps, and how it hurts, and how it makes us cry, how it makes us laugh. You know, movie stuff. That's what we talk about, movie stuff. And today we're going to talk about movie stuff because that's what we talk about. But all kidding aside, good to see you, Karen. Hope everything's going well out there in Maryland land.
It is. It's good to see you too, Greg.
Thank you.
Hope
Everything's going well
everything's
here.
going well out there in Indiana land.
Well, we call it Indy. Okay. Yeah, things are great here in Indiana. Oh boy. But you know what? I'm gonna tell you something cool I saw today. And before we really get started, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you think this is cool. A lot of times when I'm on my way to my major gig, I find that nature has always been a cool thing for me, and I love nature. And I'm really into birds and especially birds of prey and stuff like that. But what was interesting to me today, and this happened a few times, but I've been glad to see it. I'm driving to work, and then you can see phone wires, phone lines, electrical lines. And I'm driving, and I look off to the side, and there's something on the line. Now, a lot of times you see little small birds kind of hanging on the wire. This was not a small bird, because a hawk is not a small bird. And this hawk was sitting on the wire, and he was just sitting there like, and I often wonder when that hawk's on the line, if someone's like riding their bicycle or walking, and they just have to look up and they're thinking they're going to see like, oh, I don't know, a parakeet or or some kind of small little bird, and all of a sudden it's like a hawk, and you're like, whoa, okay, it's kind of close. That's kind of close.
Right.
Kind of close. And then one day, just going back a few weeks ago, I was driving to work, and sure enough, a hawk was on the wire. I'm like, this dude likes this wire. But I remember thinking about the people who were riding their bike just prior to that, thinking, wow, they're out riding their bike. That's cool. Get out in the nature. I mean, COVID is doing what it's doing, but at least these people got out in the nature. And then the next time I look up, and I was like, there's a hawk up there. What's going to happen when they see that hawk? That's all I wanted to know, because they're a lot closer to that hawk than I was, and I can see it clearly from the car. So, what's it gonna do when they're on the sidewalk riding right by the hawk? Anyway,
They're
didn't
hawk
hear any
bait.
screams or didn't hear any screams or anything, so I guess it went okay.
Well,
But
when
it's
you're
cool
hawk
to see that
bait,
kind of
nobody
stuff.
can hear you scream.
No, because hawks, that's 100,000 gazillion miles an hour when they go. Phew. Oh, I saw
Yeah.
that too. I saw that too this week, by the way. It's really quite interesting. These birds out
Wow.
here. But then again, the
Wow.
area that I live in has eagle in the name. So what do you think? There's a lot of eagles around here. What can I say? And it's not in Philadelphia. But anyway,
Sweet.
with all that
Oh,
being said, let's get into the subject of a real point of view here on Movie Land. What we are talking about today is a really interesting subject, Karen. So why don't you give us kind of an overview and get us started into this conversation that's really a pretty important one, to be honest with
well, we're talking about the land of movies in movie land. What has been going on with the movie industry as impacted by the pandemic? And there have just been so many changes and so many just hugely significant impacts that have permeated every sector of the industry. And I just think it's time for us to sort of just take a look from our own perspectives about what we think the movie industry looks like these days and what the future is going to be under these circumstances. And what, once the pandemic is over, assuming that it is over in I guess I have to hope that it's going to be over, much like the Spanish flu was over at some point. It took 2 years. Um, so once the pandemic is past, what's the movie industry going to look like? So that's sort of what I was hoping that we could talk about. Um, I mean, this time last year, we were going to movies, or we were choosing not to go to movies, but we certainly had a choice of movies to go to if we wanted to. I can't remember what was out in October last year, but it was sort of like that lull right before the holiday season begins. And I can remember during the holiday season going to see The Rise of Skywalker, and being disappointed. And but I look back on that time now, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, the movie was disappointing, but it was sure nice to go with my brother to go see the movie and to kind of hang out. And he had his popcorn and I had whatever it was I was chewing on. And it was a fun experience. And now it's like, in the space of like a few months, that is now, I can barely remember what that's like.
Right.
I've not been to a movie theater of any kind since, I think the last time I went to movie theater was January, when I went to see The Photograph with Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield. And I went with a friend of mine, and it was a very enjoyable evening, but that was the last time I've been to a movie theater.
So let me ask you this. If you had an opportunity to go now, would you?
No.
Okay, so that's a kind of an open-ended question, because there are so many different avenues, first of all, that one can facilitate to see films. And then there's the other thing about cost. There's the other thing about, I think some of these things having to do with cost and opportunity to view different movies was already in our sights. Those things were changing in the movie industry prior to the pandemic. But now with the pandemic making it even that much more um, in our face, well, really that much more prevalent to with regard to those options that we were thinking, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't, end up being, this is what we're going to have to do if we're going to get to see the things that we want to see and still have that feeling of wonder and imagination with regard to film as it's presented to us. So what changed before the pandemic, and since the pandemic, how has that permeated since then?
Well, I mean, the pandemic, I think, took, I mean, or not, I don't want to say unfortunately, but at least in this country, the pandemic sort of took us by surprise. Yes, there were warning signals, but we went from what was essentially a Wuhan problem in December to, oh my God, this is a New York problem, this is an LA problem, it was a Seattle problem for what seemed like the longest time, and then all of a sudden it became, an entire national problem, and it didn't matter where you were susceptible to catching this virus. And because of that, I don't think any industry was able to really prepare adequately. We were sort of finding out what the impacts were as we went along, and that certainly pertains to the movie industry. So you went from, I mean, January, February, I mean, people were probably in the middle of filming. March, when the country basically shut down, some studios were wrapping up shows because you've got like the May sweeps, but you may finish filming for the May sweeps. You could easily, I mean, it's not hard to imagine that studios are going to wrap the season in March, even though it's not going to be shown until May.
Right.
But the country basically shut down in early March, right around the time that a lot of shows were either in the middle of filming their last episodes if they were television shows, um, or movies were wrapping, or maybe they were in the middle of filming. With movies, you never know. Movies, they may have just started, they may be in the middle, they could be towards the end. um, but we don't know. And the other thing that just came as a huge surprise was, so many movies involve travel to different locations. And if you can't travel, if all of a sudden, like 2 weeks ago, you could fly to England, or you could fly to LA or New York or wherever and not think about it. And you go from that to, well, New York's shutting down, or, no, if you're coming from Asia, we're not letting you in the country. Or if you're coming from this place or that place, then, or if you're coming from the United States, we're not letting you in our country, and you're the studio that has this shoot scheduled there. Or you have this huge movie set up in Italy, and the entire country literally shuts down within within, it seems like, a week, like the week before everything was fine, and then all of a sudden, Armageddon, basically.
Right.
So that means if you're the head of the studio, do you scrap the film? Are you scrambling to find some other place that isn't going to shut down? But of course, this is happening kind of on the fly. So even if it hasn't shut down, it might shut down.
Right.
And what are you going to do what are you going to do with these actors? What are you going to do with this investor money? And what are you going to do about distribution of the film? Is it, assuming that you can get the film done, what happens then? Do you release it on schedule? Do you stream it? Do you do an art house sort of distribution, or do you do a widescreen release? All of that stuff just costs money, and that's assuming that you have some place to show it. But
Right.
now we're in a situation where, there are some movie theaters that are open, but Regal Cinemas, it's owned by Cineworld, recently announced that they were going to shut all of their theaters in the US and the UK.
Mhm.
All of them, every single one.
What I found interesting with regard to that, and if I may piggyback on that for a moment,
Mhm.
was after hearing that news and reading articles about what was going on and how such a high percentage of theaters being shut down across the country. And normally, when we're thinking about bailouts, we think about industrial bailouts of, cars, or um, financial bailouts of banks and things like that. Now we're talking about the movie industry trying to get governmental help, specifically to help bail out, and the film industry as a whole, as well as primarily a lot of these theaters that would house these releases that you aforementioned, and they're looking for a government bailout. I mean, this is unheard of, in this in at all. I mean, it's just unheard of, and yet that's exactly what's happening. Looking for a bailout because of all these businesses, big and small, that are being hit so hard by the fact that if we're told to stay in, if we're told to self-distance or distance ourselves from other people, how do you pack a theater, which is how in a theater you're making money? How do you do that when no one's going to be there? No one's coming to the door. We're not just talking about people not coming to the theater so that they can pay to see the film. We're talking about the people inside, the people who are behind the counter, people that run the theater, the people that provide just all those services at the theater, that are losing their jobs because of this. Part-time jobs, full-time jobs. We're talking about, we would go to a theater and it'd be packed a lot, and many times, especially if there's such an important film would be being shown, they'd be packed. And so, working at a theater was a good income. excuse me, and if not a great income as an individual income, but at least a great additional income for a lot of people. So now you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people not being able to work inside the theater and for the theater. And then you're also talking about, okay, like Karen, like you alluded to a moment ago, if the film is not necessarily ready to be done, and we kind of talked about this before coming on the show, then what's going to happen? As you said, do we scrap it? Do we put it aside for next year, which we're not guaranteed that either? And I think I related to the athletics. You were talking about they're playing sports and all this stuff, and we know that the salaries of these people are humongous, and yet there's not even a third of the people. It's like 1/5 of the people in the building, we'll say, basketball or football. And so now no one's going to the theater. There's not even 1/3 or 1/5 or 1/16. They're closing down, period. And so how does that affect the present and the future? Now, obviously, if it's streaming kind of situation, sure, that's going to help the situation, especially for the filmmakers and distributing it through platforms like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, for example. Yeah, that's going to help the consumer greatly, and also help the film industry in general too. But you know, they were doing that before the pandemic a little bit, giving you those choices. But the theater was still one of those choices, and it was still one of those choices for Hollywood too. So now, you know, all that money that's out there, that was out there, is now, you know, minimized retrospectively quite vastly. But it's affecting every class of people, from the people who have those jobs inside the theater, to the filmmakers, to the people who are acting in the films, to those people who are producing the films, and those people who are investing in the films. All those things are being, you know, it's almost like cut off. Now, obviously, you know, the film industry has made people millionaires. The film industry has made people very wealthy, but they're people. So because of this situation, maybe everybody's not doing well with their finances. Maybe everybody's not doing as good as one thinks just because they have had those successes. And we know, just like in any other industry, you have to keep those successes going, or otherwise, you know, some of those things are going to suffer. And what about the new and fledgling actors who are up and coming, who aren't rich and this is their opportunity? Well, some of those opportunities have been put aside because, again, some of those productions weren't completed. Some of those situations have not come to fruition. So I think it's a lot more of an impact than people give it credit, because when you're in it, when you're a part of it, that's when you feel the most dire regarding it. Fortunately for a lot of consumers, you're looking at it as in an entertainment factor. You're still getting entertainment through the streaming situations, whether it be the large screen type venue or the small screen type venue. But at the same time, a lot of those choices are starting to thin out a little bit too. We've been in our houses a lot. We've seen a lot. So what's next? And is it the quality of what we're looking for going to be there? Because now those studios don't have those people there either. And because of this pandemic and trying to stay a distance away from people, I've seen may I just briefly, I was watching a TV show. They told you when the show started that they were going to have, they were in the middle of production for these particular shows, these episodes for this show. And so they decided to take a different approach, still be a part of it, still try to produce everything virtually. And then came up with a way to use part of what they had filmed along with some animation and I was hoping it would be better than it was. And after watching one episode of it, it made it hard for me to watch the rest. So that in itself already tells you how much it impacts the situation when you can't be and do the things that you did before.
Hmm. Well, the things that I think about too, when we look at the film business, I mean, I guess what just hits at me, it feels like the stabbing pain of realizing how much we need human contact. Not only do we need human contact just because it's part of the human condition, but so much of how we do business relies on human proximity to other humans, being able to talk to them. And the movie business is extremely social. People take a meeting. I mean, that's the whole stock and trade of the movie business. If you're going to get started with the movie, you're going to take a meeting. And you need to be literally in the room where it happens, to paraphrase from Hamilton. You want to be in the room where it happens, where somebody says, yay, yeah, we're going forward with this, or maybe next time, or maybe another time, or maybe not, or maybe if we rework it. And there's so much collaboration involved in the movie business. But not only that, to actually get a movie on its feet requires a great deal of collaboration. I mean, people feed off of each other's ideas when they're in the same room, sort of going back and forth on ideas, especially writers. We have writers' rooms for a reason. I mean, a lot of movies are written by a solitary person, but even that solitary person is talking to other people, or asking for advice, or giving them sheets or drafts, and let's talk about this. And or you've got teams of people writing, or duos, trios, whatever. They're writing. Makeup artist, I mean, it's kind of hard to do makeup by Zoom. And
Copy that.
what's what's happened with a number of these, especially TV productions, is that the actors are doing their own makeup. Because I mean, they're doing their manicures, they're doing their own makeup, and maybe they're getting advice from a makeup artist, but it's not like the makeup artist is there working on your face, because they can't get close enough to work on
Right.
your face. Um, and the same thing with hair, and hair and makeup is, it's kind of like a basic part of the movie business. Costuming, fittings
Right.
for clothing, for the costume, set dressing and decorating. Kind of hard to do that by Zoom.
Right.
Sorry, I just don't know how you're going to work that. I mean, I guess people are thinking of ways to do that, but it's a poor relation to the richness of being able to be in the room with another person. I think, I don't know about you. I've been asking myself, did I take human contact for granted? Because I sure miss it now, you know. And it's not, I mean, to me, the movie business, I mean, people feed their families in the movie business. I mean, yeah, like you said, the movies have made people rich, but for many other people, it's just given them a living, so that they can send their kids to college. I mean, the gaffers, the electricians, um, the limo drivers, the caterers, they're
That's
not
a good point.
millionaires.
Right.
They're making a living. And literally, in the movie business, you're literally going from one production to another, and the next production's not always guaranteed. You hope, and the thing is that somebody's going to say, well, when you finish with this, I know that they're looking for your type of skill on this set up the street. And let me put in a call, and somebody puts in a call, and then you show up, and so you get carried on to another project.
Mhm.
And that's really the way it is for the production staff, the directors, the location scouts. you know, they've got to go talk to, they've got to figure out where this stuff is going to be filmed. Is it going to work? If you need somebody's house, you need to talk to that homeowner. Or if you need a
Mhm.
hotel, you need to talk to the, to the hotel owner or the manager or whatever. Kind of hard to do that by Zoom. And it's kind of hard to get a real sense of what a space is like by Zoom.
Right. And even casting. I mean, obviously you can talk to somebody, but you can't truly get the true feeling of how well they might do in a particular situation with a particular script. And so even those things, yeah, I mean, there's just so many industry wide scenarios and situations that are not happening because of this.
Right. And in the Washington Post, there was an article in the Washington Post in May of this year titled, "With Theaters Shuttered, Virtual Cinema Has Saved the Day for Now." But in that article, Ann Hornaday, who's one of the top theater critics in the country, but she works for the Washington Post, she talked to Tom Bernard, who is the one of the presidents or the co-president of Sony Classics. And this is what he said: "Without theatrical, the business disappears." And then he was describing the life cycle of a film that goes from theaters to airplanes and hotels to video on demand and finally to cable. He said all these stops unlock value, but it has to start with the theaters and the reviews and the trailers and the audience awareness that that generates. And I think, to me, this is a really key statement, because I mean his perspective really rings volumes in terms of what kind of world are we living in. We could literally be in a world without movie theaters, where, I mean, because, I mean, already, I mean, for me, Regal Cinemas closing down means something personal to me, because my personal favorite movie theater to go to was a Regal Cinema.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to be able to go to that, at least for the foreseeable future. And so on one hand, it's relatively easy to say, well, yeah, and I know I've done this, I'll Netflix it. I'll just wait for it to show up on cable. I'll wait for it to show up on Hulu or Netflix or Amazon or whatever. But every single one of those films that showed up on those platforms before that, a lot of them were released in theaters. And so there was some sort of value generated from that theatrical release, even if it wasn't considered successful,
Right.
or even if it wasn't considered a blockbuster. There was still some value that was generated. And don't forget, there are also people who own the theaters, the physical theaters. They're the ones hiring the concession workers. They're the ones hiring the people who clean the theaters, the projectionists, and all of that. And they get paid by the studios to show these movies, or they actually purchase the movies from the studios, and then they make their money back by ticket
Through sales,
prices,
right.
and more to the point, the concessions. That's really where they make their profit. So there's that work here. But if you say, well, we don't need theaters, because as a consumer, I'll just stream it.
Mhm.
There's no concession. There's no theatrical house. There's no experience. You don't get that experience of seeing something on a larger than life screen. And there are advantages to being able to stream something in your home, but there are also advantages to being able to see something on a movie theater, depending on the type of movie. And if you completely jettison that from the conversation, then to me, streaming looks a lot less attractive.
Hmm.
It just looks like, yeah, like an also ran, like a But yeah, I mean, yeah, I could stream it, but I don't really have to stream it. Because the sense of, oh, this is something big that I'm waiting to come to me, that's gone. Because now
Right.
it's just from some location, and then it shows up in my queue. And it becomes a lot more ordinary.
And that's the point. Is it going to become more ordinary? And I think it already has. And that's a sad thing. We're thirsting to, as you said, become social, or not become social, but regain our social status in the world with just even going outside and saying hi to somebody. So we're sitting in the house where at one point it was just an option. Now it's like, this is it. And, you gotta wait next week in case something else comes out. And it's gonna be coming out less and less because there's not as much of a queue, as you said, available anymore. It's gonna get to the point to where if things don't change for the better soon, we'll become hermits, um, worse than we are already. And that's kind of
And
sad.
and the pandemic has just completely disrupted so many things in terms of what we thought of as our lives. But with the movie business, it's just really interesting to see, we have this really terrible situation, and it's like somebody just, snatched the rug out from under an entire industry to me. And there wasn't, and while there were warnings, there weren't enough warnings, not in the ways in which we could understand that, oh my goodness, something truly disruptive, cataclysmically disruptive is about to happen. We didn't get enough time to process what that really means. So then we're scrambling, literally, and at the same time, we're completely retrenching. So what we think of as the movie, the movie business, and what we think of as movies, now it's like we're left to question all of that. And studio heads are looking at, do I have product to do I have product to actually distribute? But even if I do, where am I sending it to? Because if Regal closes down and AMC closes down, and pick your theaters, Landmark closes down, whatever they are, where are you going to distribute these movies to? Even if you were able to wrap the movie, where are you going to send them? And so that's a question. And I know exactly what you mean about like your experience in watching Blacklist, because I can remember looking at something, some sort of, I can't remember the name of the show. I can't even remember what type of show it was, but I was watching some kind of show where they basically, instead of having everybody in the room, everybody was a Zoom box.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't nearly as interesting to watch, because part of the interest in watching movies or television shows is, it's not only the words that they're saying, it's them occupying this space and interacting physically in that way, because they're touching or because they're not touching, or because they're talking, or they're close to each other but they're not talking, and they're showing these emotions face to face. And it's really hard to convey that. I think it's possible, but it's much harder to convey that through a Zoom platform. And I keep saying Zoom as if that's the only platform, but I'm using Zoom as a
The essence
euphemism
of,
for
yeah.
what we're doing, right now. Um, it just it's really, I know what you mean, because to me that does become just kind of harder to watch, or it's just not as emotionally interesting because something's missing.
And let's look at it. Obviously, there's things out there that we can watch. Streaming has made it so, and there's ability to see movies, TV shows, whatever. But I think what happens is part of the mystique for me to go to a movie theater was to be able to see that large screen and be able to have my eyes filled with the interpretation of what the film was supposed to be through the director's eyes, producer's eyes, the actors' portrayals and emotions, and in some part dream a little bit of what I thought could be or would be, or it take me away to some foreign land. Um, I know that a lot of us have big screen TVs anymore, but it seems to me the foreign land is not so foreign when I'm sitting in my house and watching it on a big screen, but yet um, I can still see my window, still see my floor, get off my couch and pause it and go to the bathroom kind of thing. But we were talking about even last week the movie Gladiator being the year 2000, and it's a more of a new classic epic. Epic movies to me have felt so much better when I went to the theater to see them. And my movie going in them, especially in recent years, have been more or less, um, I would spend more money going to what I felt was going to be a humongous big screen event, i.e., like a Gladiator or Lord of the Rings, because that's what I did for Lord of the Rings. And as you alluded to, Karen, some of the Star Wars stuff. Um, it's not that it doesn't look good on the TV screen at home, but getting it initially, I'm getting in, trying to have this anticipation for, and somehow it is lacking that anticipation, the big screen or the availability of the IMAX or that type of experience has been relegated to 2D in front of my screen instead of 3D like in the big theater. And so I agree, it does lose a little bit of its luster there. Now, obviously, we want to be entertained, especially in this time of the pandemic. And so, yeah, we're watching a lot more television, watching a lot more films on TV and the streaming services, whatever those different venues are. Um, but at the same time, even that is going to run thin if this pandemic doesn't lift in the near future. Um, and we have to endure it for a long time. Um, we have choices, but some of those choices weren't that great initially in the first place. And for those of us who really like watching movies and going to the theater, um, it's a sad thing to hear that so many of them are closing, um, and filing for bankruptcy, and that the industry in general is looking for a bailout from the government, almost as if it was the Red Cross. I mean, that's tough. That's tough in this day and age. And I agree with you, Ken. I don't think anybody foresaw anything like that, because we do tend to take things for granted as people in general. But in this case, where it wasn't something we thought was going to be interrupted and or impacted at all.
Or if it was going to be impacted, it would be for like maybe a month or two, because the initial assessments were that, okay, we've got to hunker down for like maybe a month, maybe 2 months, 8 weeks. And when summer comes, we'll be back to normal because we will have figured this out. Well, not only did we not figure it out, but in some ways, summer was worse.
Right.
And now, but then we sort of came to grips with summer, but now fall's coming and fall could be worse. And winter could be worse, because especially because you also need to protect yourself against the flu as well as now, this incredibly contagious disease. But I mean, you were mentioning, our discussion about Gladiator last week. Can you imagine filming Gladiator in a pandemic situation? You can't.
Yeah.
How do you do a war movie where the whole point is that, hand-to-hand combat? How do you do that in a pandemic situation? You can't. It's not like you can put mask on them and say, okay, go for it, or wear the mask until I say, action, and then take them off and go do your war scene, and then put them back on. That's not how any of this works.
And I can see
So
you messing up I'm sorry, you messing up your lines too. You can't do that. We don't have that kind of time.
right.
It's like, you're like, and to be or not, what do you say? Not to be.
Yeah, I
Not to
couldn't hear
be.
you. He's got
Not
mask
to
mouth,
be.
so I can't
Yeah,
understand
no.
anything he's
Yeah,
saying.
right. What
You
did
know,
you say?
so it's
Who
like
has fleas?
just
What's that have to do with anything? Okay.
exactly. And I mean, it sort of reminds me. Remember in the movie "It's a Wonderful Life" where um,
George?
yes, well, I wasn't going to say George. I was going to say Clarence, but in the
The
movie
angel?
"It's a Wonderful Life," where Jimmy Stewart's character George was like, "Oh well, but my brother, my I saved him. I saved him from the ice pond, and all the men in that transport, they weren't killed. They were never attacked because my brother was able to fly his plane and save them." And Clarence says, "No, all those men died because you were never born, so." You weren't there to save Harry, so Harry wasn't there to save those men in the transport. And then he said, one life touches so many other lives. And I mean, here it's like, well, you've got this industry which, and I'm certainly guilty of bashing the movie industry, and I'll be the first one to say, I'm not going to the movies to see that. That's not worth my time. I'll see Black Panther in the movies. I'll see Avengers Endgame in the movies. I'm not going to see, The War with Grandpa in the movies,
Right.
or whatever. Pick a movie. I'm not going to be bothered with that. I'll stick it, or I'll wait for it to, I'll just wait for it to come to my TV. But now it's like, but that was when the proposition was, of course, these movies are going to be available, and even if you don't want to see them, other people will want to go see these movies, and they'll be available. They'll be in that avenue, and if you want to make the personal decision to wait for it to come to you, that's fine. But when the proposition is no one gets to go to the movies, and they'll never be seen in that situation again. Like I said, if my 22-inch TV is the only option to see Avengers Endgame, I've really lost interest in Avengers Endgame. Part of the interest is seeing it on a 12-foot screen or
Right.
17-foot screen, like an IMAX screen, you know. And, you know, the movie industry, the economic impact of the movie industry is palpable. I mean, pretty much every state in this country has a movie office, like an office of film and development.
Right.
And there's a reason why so many states offer tax credits to movie projects, studios or to filmmakers who want to film in Washington, D.C. or New York City or wherever. There's a reason why that there are film credits, because yes, it costs the jurisdiction money to issue that film credit, but what they make back in the way of economic impact is so much greater, or at least that's the bet, that's the hope, that whatever the economic impact will be is so much greater, because these people are going to restaurants, these people are going to beauty parlors and spas, these people are going to nightclubs and the casinos, these people are, they're staying in hotels, they're ordering room service, which means you need people to bring those services to bear, or to create those entities that they want to patronize. And they're ravenous consumers. I mean, movie projects are ravenous consumers in a good way.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes along and says, well, that's nice, now I'm taking it away.
Yeah. I mean,
hope you enjoyed it, because now it's gone.
Yeah, hiring the locals, people look forward to that. Being even a part, even if it just means that you're an extra. They're not taking extras from Hollywood and bringing them to Chicago. They're just going to get extras from Chicago.
My first paycheck as an actor was as an extra.
See, well, there you go. And you're from Chicago. Fancy that.
Wasn't in Chicago, but yes. But yeah, I mean.
But the point is, the point is that it's a lot of, as you alluded to, it's economics. And when you bring those things to a city, it's the same thing in other entertainment industries as well. Those cities thrive with having that extra money and being infused, however it's infused. And that's the whole point, i.e., of having those film offices in those major cities like that.
And yes, and in the state, I mean, I remember the Maryland Film Office when they were location scouting for, Homicide: Life on the Street or The Wire, in Baltimore, it's just, I don't know. I mean, at one point, my first sort of impression before the pandemic really hit was that, we're seeing the ways in which we do movies. We're seeing the movie business, the movie distribution business change. And streaming is a viable option for that. And there's some movies that are really meant to go straight to Netflix or straight to Amazon, in spite of whatever hopes the movie makers may have had. When the finished product is done, some of this just doesn't resonate, because you're putting up, or you have to deal with too many sort of emotional cost to they have to be worth it. So it's like, if you're going to go to the movie theater, it's got to be worth the gas, the drive, the cost of the concessions, the sitting in a communal space with people you don't know, and the inevitable person who's texting, phoning, chatting, chewing. And you want to, and so there are those sort of ancillary ancillary costs that don't really figure into the cost of the ticket. Right. And you can't really control them. But to me, in my mind, I've always felt like, there's some movies for which I will put up with those inconveniences, because the value of seeing that movie far outweighs the cost of those inconveniences, and far outweighs the cost of the movie ticket. So it's like, it's not just the movie ticket, it's also the emotional cost of putting up with this other stuff that I'm not going to like. So to me, it's like, yes, there's some movies for which I will undertake that cost, and some movies, I don't really need to undertake that cost. I can wait. for the window, the 6-week window for it to come to Netflix, or the 8-week window for it to get to Amazon, or whatever it is. But like movies like Black Panther, no, there was, of course, I wanted to see that on an IMAX screen. There's no way that my first experience of seeing Black Panther was going to be on my television. I wasn't going to wait for that to show up on Netflix or Disney Plus.
And I feel the same. I saw it in IMAX also. It was wonderful.
Right.
Felt like I was there.
So did I. I was transported. And like you said, a movie theater, especially a dark movie theater, and especially an IMAX movie theater, will transport you to, you get to really suspend your disbelief in a way that you never will, with, in your house shoes and your PJs or your stretch pants or whatever it is you're wearing, or not wearing,
keep it PG.
Lounged across some sort of chair to, or couch, watching your 40-inch screen or your 50 or even your 65-inch screen. Is still 65 inches is a little bit over 5 feet. It's not like it's 17 feet.
Right. And seemingly, even if you're sitting in the middle or the back, once the theater goes dark and the movie starts going, it's bigger than life. And, you're still seeing it like, wow, okay, yeah. And I mean, you can get that feeling a little bit in your house, depending on how big your screen is, for example, but retrospectively, it's not the same.
It just isn't the same. So now, I mean, the initial, like the article that I quoted from Washington Post was, like I said, the title was that virtual cinema has saved the day for now. The question I want to pose is, did it really? Has it really? Because now we're in a situation as we are, this became real for the United States in March in ways that we never contemplated. And we're now in October. So 7 months later, in some ways we're in a better place, but in a lot of ways we're kind of in the same place that we were in, except we have more familiarity with the pandemic situation. But it's not like things are so much better that we're all taking a collective sign saying, okay, great, okay, we got through the crisis, now let's head to the movie theaters.
Right.
No.
Because there's other socioeconomical things that you got to deal with. And so that's still going to be on the back burner, sadly, especially anymore. Yeah, that's tough. I have a quote here from the Los Angeles Times. Our country can't afford to lose the social, economic, and cultural value that theaters provide. Yeah, that's tough. But yet at the same time, once this is over, we're going to be still delving into the things to try to recoup, refocus our daily lives and our social situation to where that's still not going to help these theaters recover quicker, faster. There are a lot of those entities that are going bankrupt, sadly, may not be able to recoup. Even after the pandemic, it's going to be tough.
Right. Because if movie theaters are gone, like I said, and your studio head, where are you sending them to? Without the movie theaters, you don't have anywhere to distribute your film. I mean, that's not true. You do have somewhere to distribute your film, but like Tom Bernard said, there's a life cycle, and the life cycle really begins with the theater.
Right.
With the movie theater. It doesn't begin with Netflix. Netflix is a stop in the middle, but the beginning of the life is the movie theater. But now it's like, I think, what I'm not sure what happens from here necessarily. I have to say, I was unpleasantly surprised by the announcement of Cineworld that they were closing Regal Cinemas. I'm like, well, because AMC has said specifically, we are not closing down.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that started this, where I want to move the conversation to, is we've got this sort of dichotomy going on, where there's some studios that are saying, okay, we're going straight to video.
Mhm.
And there's some studios, there's some movie makers that are saying, hell no, we're opening in a movie theater, and we're either doing it now or we're doing it later, but you will never see this on freaking Netflix until it's been shown in a movie theater for at least 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And don't even think about asking me to change that.
Mhm.
Period. End of story.
Mhm.
There's a movie that is being released, I think next week, I want to say next weekend, or maybe this weekend. I can't remember, but either this weekend or next weekend, with Robert De Niro, the war with Grandpa.
Mhm.
I
Something like
think.
that.
Yeah, something like that. And I have to say, I can't escape the irony of the very pointed. It almost seems like an admonition. This will only be seen in theaters. I mean, that's how they preface like every sort of commercial, so every sort of ad. And it's like, don't even think about paying like $30 to Disney Plus to see this, because it will only be seen in theaters.
And it is Grandpa. It is a war with Grandpa.
Right. Only in theaters. Only in theaters.
Unless you have a grandpa that you're warring with, then it can be in your house.
No. Only in theaters. No, only in theaters.
What if you're at a diner and your grandpa spills sugar?
Only in theaters.
What if your grandson is on the potty and grandpa comes in and sees him, he's embarrassed, and he's not going to fight the grandpa.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
It's not going to happen.
Only going to be seen in theaters.
He's just going to stand there and take it.
Pretty much, because it's only going to be seen in theaters.
So if I want to see grandpa in a wheelchair, right, and he stands up, right, because he says, I feel fine, I don't need this thing, and his grandson says, look, buddy, you're going to do it, that's not going to happen.
Not unless it's in a theater.
Wow. That theater's going to be awful crowded with a lot of grandkids.
Well, here's the thing that struck me about that. Yeah. You have a lot of big or pretty big stars. You have Robert De Niro, Uma Thurman, Christopher Walken, to name a few, in this movie. And so, okay, and it's a comedy, and it's a feel-good movie, a lot of slapstick, probably a lot of bathroom humor. And I'm looking at the trailers or the previews for this movie, or the ads for this movie, and I'm thinking, okay, pandemic or not, you couldn't drive me to that movie in a chauffeured limousine. I have zero interest in that movie, because it doesn't look cute. It just looks, to me, it just looks sort of like heavy-handed, and just sort of like, let's do this with these big stars to drive traffic to the theaters, and let's have kids, and cute kids and old people, and and let's make them collide and see what happens. So pre-pandemic, you couldn't have driven me to a theater to see this movie. post-pandemic, I'm like, I can wait for the year or so it'll take for it to actually show up,
And what about
in
the
a streaming
CGI?
service.
What about the CGI? Is Robert De Niro going to use any of that in this movie?
I have no idea. No, I think he's actually going to be playing himself with the son CGI.
Okay, I'm just saying, his grandson could be like him going back in the past, and he's really like, old, but he's going to make him look young like they did in the.
Well, I don't know enough about the movie to completely reject that proposition, but my guess is that no, this is not a CGI type of movie. But I'm like, Uma Thurman's old enough to be a grandmother? Really? I had no idea.
She's old enough to be a great grandmother. What are you talking about?
Uma Thurman? No, she's not.
After she killed Bill, all bets were off.
She's not that old. Come on, man.
Uma Thurman, are you kidding me? I watched Uma Thurman when I was in high school.
That was just last week.
Well, it felt like last week up here. But at my day gig, not so much. But yeah, let's look up. I'm curious, how old is Uma Thurman? I'm gonna say she's 52.
How old is Uma Thurman?
Oh, you're gonna go the easy
50
route.
years old.
She's only 50.
But my point was, she's 50.
She's old enough to be a grandmother.
And a great grandmother.
Well, she'd have to have started pretty young to be a great grandmother, for crying out loud.
Not very much. Okay, let's say she had a kid at 20. 20 years later, that kid's 20. She's 40. And then that kid has a kid at 25. She's only 45. She can be a grandmother. No problem. Easy. Easy peasy.
Yeah, grandmother, not a great grandmother.
Oh,
it would be
yeah?
her grandchild having a child.
Exactly. So
Not when she's 50.
5 years later.
No, that is, come on, dude. You are reaching. That's like a pandemic reach of epic proportions.
But I'm going to tell you, I know someone whose grandchild is almost old enough right now to have a child. So I'm just telling you, and they're not much older than me. Okay, so Uma Thurman, but you didn't think she was 50 though, did you?
She just turned 50.
You thought she was 40, didn't you?
No, I'm actually around 50, but that's still, it's not, I mean, Robert De Niro is almost 70, or is he in his 70s?
He's in his 70s, he's like 74.
Right, so Uma Thurman, if he's a grandfather, and then they've got Uma Thurman as a grandmother, and she's like a quarter century younger than him, it's a bit of a disconnect.
Uma Thurman is not young anymore.
Well, 50's the new 35, so she's a hell of a lot younger than Robert De Niro is. I'll tell you, I'll put it to you that way, partner.
Robert De Niro is 77, and he's a Leo.
Well, I knew he was a Leo, but she's more than a quarter century younger than him. Come on. So why are they both like grandparents? That doesn't even make sense.
Because it's acting. It's theater.
Because some guy did that. But
I better go back to it. Yeah, I said it's acting, it's theater. I better go back. It's just acting because it's not theater.
It's not theater. It's not
theater. It's not going to be. Okay. Theaters are closing, so it's not theater.
But now we're in a situation where and I think what precipitated the Cineworld announcement was that No Time to Die, the James Bond flick, huge blockbuster, anticipated blockbuster, that had already been delayed twice, is now being delayed again until like April or May of next year.
Wow, that's tough.
And yes, April 2021 release. It was supposed to be released in November, and Regal Cinemas or Cineworld, they were depending on that to literally drive people, because people are literally waiting with bated breath to see No Time to Die. And having that in the movie theaters in November was going to drive traffic. So even people who might be kind of reluctant might be willing to take a chance on going to the movie theaters, especially if they have emphasized again and again their cleaning protocols, and they set up contactless ways for people to get concessions, and contactless movie ticket, validation, all this other stuff. People might say, okay, I'll go, or I'll go early in the morning when there won't be that many people there, or I know I'll go because it's stadium seating, and I know only the theater's going to be limited to 50% capacity. That will be a sellout, for example. But when the studio that put out No Time to Die said, we're waiting until April now. It's like that was like a death blow, because Cineworld's like, we can't hang on until April. We're already past the point of hanging by our fingernails. We were hanging on. It was going to be all we could do to hang on until November. Now you want us to wait another 6 months? That's not going to work.
Yeah.
That just isn't going to work. Candyman, that was supposed to hit theaters in mid-October, but now that's not going to show up in theaters until 2021. And I guess the thing, what I meant to say was that with No Time to Die, all the interest is because this is Daniel Craig's final appearance as James Bond.
That's right.
So it's people really want to see that.
Now, Candyman, not so much for me.
Well, I have no interest in Candyman, but I don't do horror.
I saw the original one and I was not impressed then. So, yeah.
It was considered a good film, but I'm not going to see it. Yeah. But like the Fast and Furious, F9. This was supposed to be seen in May. Then it was pushed to April. Now it's May of 2021. Right. It was supposed to be seen in May of 2020. Then it got pushed back almost a year to April 2021, and now a full year till May of 2021. Minions: The Rise of Gru, which is like a very reliable family type, movie.
Yeah, I like Minions. I like the series. Yeah.
Well, it was supposed to be in theaters in July of 2020. It won't be shown until July of 2021. And there are all kinds of other, Soul, which is the Pixar cartoon about a junior high school band teacher, that is now headed straight to Disney Plus. It will not be seen. It will not go to theaters.
What's the name of it?
Soul. SOUL, Soul. And it's distinctive because it's one of the first releases with a majority African American voice cast.
I wonder if that's based off of that movie we watched.
You wonder what now?
Okay, I remember there was a movie that I critiqued for Quiet on the Set magazine, and it had to do with soul, and it was about a band teacher who helped all these kids realize their future by helping them through music. And they came back to give him homage not long before he passed away. And they all came back and, reformed the band, and the band actually traveled for a little while. It just reminded me of
that. But Soul is now going, if you have a Disney Plus subscription, that's how you're going to see Soul. And I do plan on watching Soul on Disney Plus. But like there's supposed to be a release of Cruella this time starring Emma Stone instead of Glenn Close.
Mhm.
That's waiting until May. And then you've got all of these like huge blockbusters like Wonder Woman 1984, like Godzilla versus Hong Kong, and The Batman, and Black Widow. None of these movies are going to be released in theaters. I mean, none of these movies are going to be, they're not going to video. And frankly, I guess unless things change, the studios are sort of implying I know we could charge $30 or maybe even $50 for a video on demand release. We're not doing that.
Mhm.
It has to be seen in theaters. It has to. So you'll just have to wait. And
Yeah.
that's when you'll see it. But I know I don't want to see Godzilla versus Hong Kong on my,
Yeah. Are you
40
saying
inch.
Hong Kong? Do you mean King Kong?
I mean, Godzilla versus Kong, I meant. I don't want to see Godzilla versus Kong on my 40-inch television. I mean, I could, but after I seeing it in the movie theaters,
Right.
then I could watch it on my television. Dune is another, huge
Oh yeah.
hit.
Now that's what I'm looking forward to, and that would be wonderful in a big screen in the theater.
Right. Jason
It would,
Momoa, Josh Brolin, Timothée Chalamet. Well, this has now been pushed back to October of 2021. October, a year from now.
now. Yeah.
A year from now. And I don't know when Black Widow's going to come out, frankly.
Yeah, they're talking about next year.
Sometime next year, but
Disney.
I'm not sure exactly when next year.
Yep, Disney.
And I'm not even sure that the studios made an announcement about that. The Matrix, the fourth installment of The Matrix is supposed to now come out in it was actually moved up. It was originally going to come out in April of 2022. Now it's been moved up to December 2021, but it's not clear that that's actually going to happen.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different movies out there that were expected to be major motion pictures in theaters that some of those dates are up in the air. They just have no idea.
And with the Batman, I mean, part of the problem was that the lead actor, Robert Pattinson, got COVID. So they had to delay filming because he was struck by the pandemic. Now they've started filming again, but I mean, losing a week or two is like losing a month, in terms of like when you can actually get the finished product out. You could easily lose a month or 2 or 6.
Yeah.
So it just seems to me you've got this dichotomy being set up where you've got some studios like Sony Pictures and other studios saying, hell no, it's going to a movie theater. We'll just wait until the time is right. And if that's a year from now, so be it. But then you've got Walt Disney Studios and other studios saying, maybe we can do a video release. Maybe we can do like Mulan. We'll just do an upcharge for the initial viewing, and then we'll move it to our platform.
That's tough too. That's another one I was looking forward to. I saw the original and I thought pretty good, but I was looking forward to this version. So yeah, let's be honest, it's just tough all over. And it's tough, especially for theaters and owners and service personnel. And, it's just a tough situation.
Well, on that really sad note, I guess we should maybe call this a wrap, to coin a term from the movies. But maybe we can revisit this topic again.
I think we should, because just like anything else, as things change, as things hopefully get better, maybe too we'll see a ray of sunshine or a crack of dawn somewhere in the near future with regard to this subject. I hope so.
Me
Because
too.
this is part of the fun that we have on this show in the first place. So I truly hope so.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um,
Awesome.
okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, thanks again for watching us here on A Real Point of View. Be sure to catch our previous shows either on Blog Talk Radio, some of our early shows that are archived there. Check us out on Google Podcasts. And what's most importantly, check us out on our YouTube channel under A Real Point of View. We appreciate any comments, any information that you want to share that we'd love to share with the rest of our viewers, as well as any ideas that you may have on subjects that you would like to see us cover. So thanks again for watching here on A Real Point of View. Check us out and have a blessed night and a happy tomorrow. See you guys later.
See ya.
Later, Karen.
Later.
Yeah. Ciao.